Hey everybody, I hope you all are doing well and welcome back to Michael's Matters. And retirement is something that we often see folks who are closer to retirement age really starting to worry about. And when you see Charles Schwab commercials or TD Ameritrade or John Hancock retirement commercials, there was always mostly kind of salt and pepper haired, kind of happy seniors living out their lives in an active and leisurely way. But the thing is that planning for retirement should be a lifelong thing. And moreover, those who should be planning are not in their mid-50s right now, but rather they're in their mid to late 30s. They're millennials, and according to some recent data, millennials are way behind already. So today I want to talk about whether or not millennials, that's that generation that everyone still thinks are kids, but let's face it, they are knocking on 40 right now. But are millennials, are they going to be ready to retire when they do get to that same age that those actors are portraying in those retirement planning commercials? Now, this is Michael's Matters, and if you like these videos, if you find them interesting, if you find them helpful, or hey, even if you find them useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really does help the channel to grow, and we are so thankful for that. But also, you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. All right, now, let's get down to the video. So let's start off by talking about who are millennials, because many older generations, think Gen X and baby boomers, well, they still see millennials as those young kids playing their Super Nintendos and their Pogs and their Pokemon card games. But the reality is that millennials are just about to hit middle age, with receding hairlines and mortgages and children and all that kind of good stuff that comes along with it. But to be more specific, a millennial is someone who was born from 1981 through 1996 in the halcyon days, really just before the internet started to be a thing. It also means that the first millennials will reach their retirement age, let's say at 65, as soon as 2045, which, if we are counting correctly, is just 23 years from now. That means that if the oldest millennials are not already preparing for retirement, they still have some runway left to start, but it's getting shorter and shorter every year. So that is who are the millennial. But it brings us to the next question, which is how much money does somebody in the millennial generation need to retire, and how are they doing so far? To figure this out, let's take a look at two things. First, how long will millennials be retired for, and how much money they would need to be saved in order to pay for all those things that they do while they are going to be retired. Me, I'm really looking forward to lawn bowling. Looking at the Social Security actuarial tables, we can see that somebody who is 41 right now will likely live an additional 35.21 years, which means on average a 41-year-old person right now can expect to live out to the age of roughly 76 years old. It is actually a little bit different when we look at the age for men and women, but I think we're just going to use the average, and the reason for the difference, I blame pizza rolls. But if you take that expected retirement age of 65 years old, it means that a savings a person would need to cover the cost of living for roughly 11 years worth of retirement, which makes total sense, especially if you look at retirement saving guidelines from places like Fidelity, who do this kind of thing, or any of the other retirement companies. They estimate that by age 67 to be on track for having enough retirement savings, someone would need to have about 10 times their starting salary, or presumably that would be their cost of living. To put a number figure on this, the average household income in the United States right now is at around $71,000 a year. So if we add up 10x, that would mean that a person would need to have $710,000 in the bank, or the inflation equivalent of that, by the time the oldest millennial gets to 67 years old. Also, at the age of 40, it means that according to these guidelines, the traditional kind of guidelines, millennials should have about 3 times worth of their starting salary to be up to speed. That would be $213,000 in some sort of saving, ideally an interest-generating retirement account like a 401k or a Roth IRA, etc., in savings. Lastly, if we were to look at what $710,000 in savings looks like from today's money, but inflate that out to $2046 with an average inflation rate of 3.5%, according to the Forbes inflation calculator, that comes out to $2,628,761.06 in 2046 money. Whew, that's a lot. But even looking at estimates of what it would be to live comfortably, millennials could need as much as $4 million in savings by the time they retire. Again, depending on what inflation rate looks like. Now that we know how much millennials potentially will need to retirement, let's talk about the hot part of all this, which is how much does the average millennial have saved at the moment, so right now. Well, according to Fidelity data, they show that millennials on average have $44,900 in their 401k, but the median amount is just at $15,500. What this means is that there are a few people with quite a large amount of money in their 401ks already, and then a bunch of folks who maybe just have a few dollars in there, which brings that average to $44,900. So needless to say, we as millennials, as a generation, and I'm not speaking for all of them, but I'm speaking for some of them, we are not there yet. But Fidelity again did mention that millennials have had about a 19% increase in their retirement accounts since the beginning of the year. But admittedly, when surveyed by Goldman Sachs, they found that 34% of millennials say that they are behind on how much they would have liked to have had in savings for retirement. To put a finer point on this, a report from the National Institute of Retirement Security found that 2/3 of working millennials have $0 saved for retirement, which means that those 34% who say they are behind on savings are definitely using a bit of understatement. Now, for millennials, you could point the dirty end of the stick at them for a variety of reasons, but there are some other reasons that folks in the millennial generation are falling short and pretty far behind Gen Xers and baby boomers when it comes to saving at this point in their lives. And actually, believe it or not, even Gen Zs are doing better at saving, so the next generation after millennials in comparable terms. So there are a couple reasons why millennials are in a worse situation than older generations. And again, these are not excuses, but just simply the truth around the dynamics of work and savings in this generation. First is that millennials have more debt than any other generation. In fact, they face around 300% more student debt than previous generations. And of course, this is a big controversy, especially this year, as the attempt by President Biden to forgive all student debt didn't really go exactly as planned. But as student loan payments kick back in, I can imagine that 19% that millennials had an increase in their savings last year that we just saw from Fidelity is probably going to go down a little bit. Secondarily, assets, or like physical things, things that people own, like homes that appreciate in value and can later be sold off for cash. Well, home ownership already is down in the millennial generation. In fact, millennials are about a half as likely to own a home as a similar age adults were back in the 1970s. And lastly, and just really an unfortunate roll of the economic timetable dice, is that millennials who graduated college did so at a really the most inopportune time in the last 20 years, right in the heart of the 2008 financial crisis, or as we call it, the Great Recession, which was followed up by 10 years later by a pandemic, which didn't do that much to help, and we're still finding out what the end results of those are, at least economically. So overall, thinking about the situation of millennials, well, it's looking pretty rough, because the reality is that we continue to move up the generational ladder, that is, getting older, but the benchmarks to hit for a comfortable retirement are only getting higher and higher. Furthermore, the economic system is sort of stacked against new savers as it is, as inflation is staying steadily higher with spikes like last year that are cutting into the daily budgets of basically everybody, and moreover inflating the cost for housing and making it even more difficult to get loans and mortgages, to the point that as an asset class, housing is becoming almost off limits, out of bounds to millennials. But there is still some good news. One is that the job prospects for everybody after the pandemic have really favored anyone who is still young enough to work, and even then some. Additionally, baby boomers are making their way into retirement and even beyond, and that will present a lot of opportunities as the generations move out of their working years and even past retirement for Gen X and millennials to take up those spots. With such a large group of people moving out, that is the boomers, it will put a premium on the work that younger generations can do, and has already led to a massive increase in compensation to middle class and blue-collar workers. Take the UPS, for example. The last really tricky part for millennials is the reality that reliance on Social Security when they do eventually retire is going to be quite shaky at this point. Sure, we are all still having to pay into it, but the guarantee that it will be there, like what the boomers had and the silent generation and probably the Gen X have, well, that's simply just not going to be there. And it is far, far, far from certain it'll be an income that any of the subsequent generations will be able to rely on throughout their retirement, which makes the lack of savings with millennials even worse. All right, so that's it for today's Michael's Matters, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, if you found it interesting, if you found it helpful, or if you at least found it useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really does help the channel grow, which we are so thankful for that. But also, you get notifications when our newest and most informative videos become available. So for Michael's Matters, I'm Michael, hoping that you take care of yourselves, take care of others, and have a happy, healthy